Okay, so what if pretty much everything we've been told about addiction is, well, wrong? We're about to dive into a really powerful perspective from Dr. Jaffe that completely reframes our habits not as some kind of moral failing, but as a totally understandable response to hidden pain.
We're not starting this explainer with a textbook definition. We're starting right here, in a terrifying, real moment of crisis. This was the author's rock bottom, the absolute end of one road, and, really, the beginning of a whole new journey to figure out what was actually going on.
And look, whether it's your morning coffee, scrolling through social media, being a workaholic, or online shopping, the idea here is that these kinds of compulsive behaviors aren't some rare defect. They are a fundamental and honestly a surprisingly common part of just being human.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 165 million. That's almost half the entire population of the United States. And we're talking about everything from substances to our phones to food. This is not some fringe issue, it's a mainstream reality for so many of us.
And then there's the cost, $2 trillion. That's the jaw-dropping annual cost to the U.S. economy. That's money pouring into healthcare, the justice system, lost productivity. A number that big forces you to step back and ask a really important question. Is our entire approach to this problem just fundamentally broken?
So this right here, this just shatters that old myth of us versus them. You know, the addicts over there and the normal people over here. I mean, if nearly half the population is struggling with this stuff, how can we possibly call it abnormal? The line isn't just blurry, it might not even exist at all. Okay, so if these struggles are so incredibly common, why have our traditional ways of treating them been so unsuccessful? The argument here is that it's because our entire foundation, the way we think about it, is just plain flawed. For decades, this has been the story we've been told, right? That addiction is this biological disease you can never really cure, only manage. And usually, that means you have to abstain from something forever. It's a story that honestly leaves a lot of people feeling broken and completely powerless.
But this is where the data tells a totally different and frankly a pretty shocking story. Check this out. People are dramatically more likely to recover from alcohol addiction all on their own with no formal treatment than people who actually complete rehab programs. How is that possible if it's a chronic disease that needs intense medical help?
And this distinction right here is the absolute heart of this new approach. See, addiction isn't a single disease like diabetes. It's a syndrome, which is just a collection of symptoms. What that means is that two people can have the exact same compulsive behavior, but for completely different reasons. And that changes everything.
So this brings us to the central idea of this whole framework, the concept of hooks. This is where we stop looking at the behavior itself and start digging for what's really going on underneath.
Here's the key insight, the big aha moment. The addiction, the habit, the thing you can't stop doing, that isn't the problem. It's actually a solution. It's a form of self-medication that people use to get relief from the pain of these deep, invisible hooks.
Let's make this real. Let me tell you about Linda. She was a high school student, and before every single volleyball game, every student government meeting, she would get so sick with performance anxiety that she would literally vomit by the team bus, in public with all her teammates watching.
Then one day, a friend offered her a joint. She took a hit, and within seconds, the nausea was just gone. For Linda, cannabis wasn't some party drug. It was a miracle cure. It was a medicine for her anxiety that worked so well, she kept using it for over 20 years. Her behavior was a direct response to her hook.
Or take another story, Aaliyah's. As a child, she suffered horrible sexual abuse. But when she finally found the courage to tell her family, they called her a liar and punished her. I mean, can you imagine? This created these incredibly deep hooks of mistrust and betrayal, making it almost impossible for her to feel safe with anyone.
So her drug use? It wasn't a moral failing. It was a desperate attempt to just numb the constant, unbearable pain that those hooks created for her every single day. The drugs were an escape when a reality was just too painful to live in.
So as you can see, hooks come in all shapes and sizes. They can be huge, traumatic events, or they can be the slow, grinding pain of low self-esteem or loneliness. But the one thing they all have in common is that they create this urgent, powerful need for relief.
Okay, so if the real problem is the hook and not the behavior, how in the world do you create change? Well, it takes a smarter model than just telling someone to stop it. This spiral model, it basically gives us a map of the whole chain reaction. So it starts with a stimulus, that's a trigger that pulls on your hook.
That leads to your perception of it, how you see it, which then creates an emotional activation. That's the feeling. That feeling then triggers your usual response, the habit, which leads to an outcome. Think about Linda. The stimulus is seeing the volleyball court. Her perception is, oh no, I'm going to fail. This creates the activation of that intense nausea. Her response, smoke cannabis, and the outcome is relief. The real power here is seeing that you can step in earlier in the chain. You can change your perception, or you can find new ways to handle the activation. That's where the real change happens.
And this is where the whole framework becomes so incredibly empowering. It flips the script entirely, from a story of failure and helplessness to one of personal control and real hope.
So, instead of being locked in this lifelong battle against a behavior you're told you're powerless over, this approach gives you a totally new mission. Find and heal the wound that's causing all the trouble. Because when the wound actually heals, the need for the medicine, whatever it is, it just starts to fade away.
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? This is why focusing only on abstinence so often fails. It's like trying to fix a huge leak in your ceiling by just frantically mopping the floor. I mean, you're working really hard on the symptom, but you're never actually fixing the source of the problem.
Ultimately, this whole idea invites us to ask ourselves a much more compassionate and frankly a more useful question. It's not, what's wrong with me that I can't stop? Instead, it becomes, what happened to me that created this pain? And what is it that actually needs to be healed?
So at the end of the day, this isn't just a new theory. It is a fundamental shift in how we see things. By focusing on healing our hidden hooks, instead of just waging war on our behaviors, we move away from a story of shame and powerlessness and into one of understanding, of agency, and of the very real possibility of deep, lasting change.